At my last job, the founder of the company submitted a rulemaking petition to the SEC in the hope that Form 144s would be mandated to be filed electronically on Edgar. It didn't go anywhere, not because it was a bad idea, it was a no-brainer, but because the SEC has only so much bandwidth to conduct rulemaking. The agency has its own priorities. That's the way the cookie crumbles. I always dislike that phrase. Today, on Zippy Point. I'm Brock Romanek. I'm a big fan of yous. I would wager to guess that there might not be a single expert out there when it comes to SEC rulemaking petitions. That's because they're simply not that important, but yet here I am making a video about them. Here are 5 things related to SEC rulemaking petitions you should know. 1. What is a rulemaking petition? 2. Is the SEC required to consider them? 3. Why doesn't the SEC take them seriously? 4. What's a better route to go? 5. How to submit one. 1. What is a rulemaking petition? A rulemaking petition is a mechanism through which any interested party can request a federal agency to issue, amend, or repeal a rule. These petitions are not well known, even among experts in the field, but they're much better known now than they were before the birth of the web. I doubt many people heard of them before the SEC began posting them online. According to the SEC's webpage about these things, the petition should include 2 things. 1, text or substance of any proposed rule or amendment, or specify the rule or portion of any rule requested to be repealed. And 2, statement of their interests and or reasons for requesting commission action. Breaking news. If you take a gander at the rulemaking petitions posted on the SEC's website, you'll see that the formats vary dramatically. A lot of them don't meet both these requirements, particularly a lot of them don't provide draft rule text for the changes they want. So the SEC has been pretty liberal about accepting petitions no matter what they say. Fun fact, over the past decade, the SEC has received an average of a dozen rulemakings per year. 2, is the SEC required to consider them? Yes. Section 553E of the Administrative Procedures Act states each agency shall give an interested person the right to petition for the issuance, amendment, or repeal of a rule. I actually took an Administrative Procedures Act class in law school. Loved the professor. About every day he started the class with, read the rule, read the statute, read the rule, don't rely on other people's content, third-party content like this video for explaining a rule or a statute or something. You always go back and read the rule. And so now you've heard Professor Dash. This January 2020 report from the Congressional Research Services covers petitions in great detail. So you want to read that if you're interested in this topic. To be honest, I don't know much about how the SEC handles these petitions, within the agency, whether the folks that submit them get more perfunctory feedback. But the SEC's site says that all petitions will be forwarded to the appropriate office or division within the commission for consideration and recommendation, and following submission of the staff's recommendation to the commission, petitioners will be notified of any action taken by the commission. I don't know if that really happens. 3, why doesn't the SEC take them seriously? So how the SEC handles them over time might change. I really don't know, but their impact on the SEC's rulemaking agenda hasn't. I can tell you that. It's nil, none, zippo. The track record of petitions over the years simply bears out the fact that the SEC rarely takes them seriously. So I hate to be the one to break it to you, but submitting a rulemaking petition to the SEC is a waste of time. And you're wasting your time by watching this video. For example, a disclosure of political contributions petition submitted in 2011 received over 1 million comments in support. 1 million comments in support. Petitions almost never receive a single comment at all. I didn't even know you could comment on them until this petition. And the SEC never acted on that despite the 1 million comments. 1 million, think about that, 1 million. Interestingly, the SEC was even sued over its inaction in the political disclosure arena over a similar petition that was filed a few years later in 2015. I never heard what happened in that case, so I assume that the SEC won. Anyway, despite all this pressure, the SEC never acted to propose any rules related to these petitions in this area. So this illustrates how easily the SEC can safely ignore a petition without any consequences. Why doesn't the SEC more seriously consider petitions? Because they have so many other sources of information that feeds into the rulemaking agenda. First of all, the SEC chair will have a rulemaking agenda of his or her own. The SEC chair pretty much has total authority over the SEC's rulemaking agenda, subject to directives sent from Congress, a recently passed piece of legislation. So Congress often derails the SEC chair's agenda more often than you would think. It happens so often, especially over the last decade or two. Then, of course, you have pressure from the White House, individual members of Congress, all the lobbying groups, the Business Roundtable, the Council of Institutional Investors, and countless others to engage in certain rulemakings. And the SEC commissioners are out there meeting and talking to people outside in the agency constantly to get ideas about how they can improve how our markets run, how to better protect investors, how they can modify the regulatory framework to facilitate these goals. Then the commissioners have access to recommendations from their various advisory groups. These days, that means the Investor Advisory Committee and the Small Business Formation Advisory Committee in the Corp Fin area. And the SEC has other advisory groups that relate to other divisions within the SEC. How do these groups get formed? The SEC either voluntarily forms them or they're foisted upon the SEC by a piece of legislation enacted by Congress. So the names and types of the SEC's advisory groups over the years changes all the time. And then, of course, there are a host of other activities the SEC undertakes to gain input, roundtables with experts, town halls with retail investors. So it actually could be an overload of information. And so a rulemaking petition is just a little drop in the bucket. 4, what's a better route to go? At the end of the day, a rulemaking petition carries no real weight other than another piece of information floating out there in the ether that someone from the SEC might read. It's a drop in the bucket. If your petition happens to fall within an area that the SEC chair is already game to act on, then that's your stroke of good luck. And perhaps the ideas described in your petition will see the light of day. But other than that, the reality is that petitions don't get acted on, nor do they might even get attention in the press. So your time might be better served trying to get an audience with someone at the SEC that matters, or feed your idea to one of the groups that tends to have some influence at the agency. Otherwise, think of your petition as a vanity project. It's cool that you get to see your name on a document that's posted on the SEC's website. Of course, it could be more than that. It could be the precursor of someone's intention to file a lawsuit in an attempt to get the SEC to act within a particular area. The petition is filed, knowing full well that the SEC isn't likely to act, then the petitioner files a lawsuit to try to get a court to force the SEC to force the SEC to propose what's in your petition. This is a costly exercise, and I have not seen it work in the past. Number 5, how to submit one. There are no instructions on the SEC's website about how to submit a rulemaking petition. There's no mechanism to do it electronically on an online form like you would submit a comment on a rulemaking petition. So the smart thing to do is 2 things. Mail it in via postal mail to the secretary of the commission. Right now that is Vanessa Countryman. And also email a copy of that to Vanessa. Love the name Countryman. It's my favorite reggae movie.